everybody's had a happy Halloween. And here we are in November, which is the month of joy when it comes to pole attachments. We have 2 meetings scheduled this month, and hopefully we can make some good progress. Anyway, I'm Jeb Penny. I'm an executive advisor here at the Public Service Commission. This is Chair of the Commission, Angie Hatton, and we have Ellen. What's your name? I always get it.
Just Gormley's fine.
Okay, Ellen Gormley. Yeah, I can't remember. She has a hyphenated name, and it gets Bowser Gormley.
Correct.
Yes, that's right, Ellen. And then we have probably some of the other commissioners appearing remotely. We don't need to go through whoever's here. I'll look back at the video to see who is. I appreciate everybody being here, and hopefully we can make short work of today's meeting and set some parameters and expectations for the next few meetings through the end of the year. Before we start in, my plan is to start going over the updates, the status of the pole attachments in a little bit. But before we start, are there any initial matters or comments people want to make? Okay. All right. So, starting on my left to right, we've got KU, KBCA/charter, cooperatives, right? And you, sir, are you new?
I'm Evan Buckley with Dinsmore and Shoal.
You are not new, but I've only talked to you on the phone. You usually call me when I'm not done something.
That's about right.
All right.
It's good to see you.
Welcome to the front
Yes,
of the bus today. So, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Sorry, I should know you. All right. So I appreciate everybody getting in the their updates to the applications, and you all have presumably collaborated on these numbers, so you are familiar with these things. And it's only been 3 weeks since we were last here, but you all want to? I think it'd be beneficial if you kind of go over it. Maybe start with the cooperatives and kind of go through, charter, talk back and forth, see where we are on those, and then we can go over to KU if that's okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So this is, really what we've done through this process is we've taken the PRISM records from Charter and the All-in-One records where we're actually managing the permits actively and try to match up either the Charter PRISM ID, which is their job number, or the OLT name, which is the optical line terminal.
In the field.
Yeah, so kind of the overall project, and then pull the all-in-one statuses into that. The only one of these that is not an all-in-one status directly is that approved no direct match row there towards the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Those are permits that we could not get a direct match on between Prism and Alden, and I think the majority of those are stuff that was done before Alden-1 was a system, so it's not in record there, and we just decided this would be too much effort to dig through. It would be 3+ years ago's worth of records to match those up, so we're just assuming all those have been approved, if they're marked as approved in charters.
And if you can remind me, Alden-1.
That's the software system that most of the cooperatives are using to manage the permitting. It's got their poll data in there, and the charter team can select the polls and submit the application virtually, and then everyone can track documents and pictures and statuses on a web portal.
Is that kind of like, Alden's kind of like Catapult?
It is.
Okay.
So it's how we submit our permits to the cooperatives for the ones that use it.
Okay, all right. All right, so when you say the no match, it's just stale data or old?
Yeah, permits pre-existing Alden, we think is the majority of them.
Permits pre-existing, meaning attachments already?
Yes.
Okay, on the poll. All right, and so when I'm looking at this, beyond that, what is, so that's only 1%, right? Unable to find an Alden-1 or on hold, is that what you mean, no match, or is that separate?
Sorry, could you say that again?
At the very bottom you say, you said there is no match, is that, but at the very bottom of the page, it says review - unable to find an Alden-1 or on hold. Is that what you mean? Like you just can't find it in Alden because it predates it?
So I believe that's on the charter end. Those are the permits that are approved, and your team is working through like verifying whether the work is done or not on that
Correct,
stuff.
under the construction aspect,
Mhm.
yes, and so what those are too is some of the cooperatives who are working through like McLean adopted Alden One at different times, right? So we have applications that were submitted directly to them, pre-Alden One, and then post-Alden One, right? I think is what Tyler's explaining, and so some of that is just what's kind of caught in the middle between what's in the current database, what predated the database, but it's in our hands from a construction perspective.
Okay, all right, all right. Like I said, a lot of these things may not find their way into the regulations because it's so minute. It's just a matter of getting you all talking to each other, which I think this docket certainly, I think, has done. But it's also things, it's not just, you all weren't here the last time. You know, hopefully you didn't have to torture yourself and watch the video. But the purpose of this this right now is to primarily look for amendments to the emergency regulation, but also there's a quarterly report that the commission files with the legislature. And so in that report, the information about where things are in the different where the attachments are in the different stages and what the holdups are the information that I would anticipate, the primary information and updates that would be provided to the legislature, right? And so I asked for a little more detail on these things, and that's why I want to go over this, is that, okay, this might not make it into the regulation. There's certain things, I mean, statutes are broad, regulations a little narrower, but then your tariffs and how you all deal with it are going to be the groundwork for how you do things. And so I don't want to get into the point where I make recommendations to the commission where the regulation's really micromanaging things, because situations change. But, you know, a lot of these questions here are for my erudition, so I can advise the commissioners when they when they draft a report and send it to the legislature. Just want to give you my philosophy on this while we do this. All right, so with the cooperatives, I'm looking at actually this is the Kentucky Utilities, but in the cooperatives, is there a place here where it says, you know, waiting on other permits? I know that there was one in the page above, current progress, and it says Kentucky Utilities, but is there one for the cooperatives as well?
There is, they're a part of our submission, so the breakdown, if you were to categorize what's on the chart of the 22,000.
Yeah.
242, our next page breaks that down into groupings.
Additional permits still pending. Thank you
Right.
for making me turn the page. I should have done that.
The
What do you find in terms of the additional permits, at least in the cooperatives, and this might be true for the KU applications? What are the primary permits upon which you're waiting that are outside the control of the utility or?
No, primarily they're additional pole permits, right? So when we look at building out an entire area, there may be 6 applications that warrant that full OLT or field
Okay.
boundary. And so there are instances where we have 4 of 6 of those applications back. Those other 2 may be with other pole owners.
Okay.
They may include make-ready, right? So we have them back, but we can't start construction in the field until we have the entirety of it.
Got it. So there may be, you know, the ones you've submitted, they've been cleared. You're just waiting. But so you're you know, you got a long string of.
Right.
And
Build, and they're just part of the funnel.
Okay, all right. Because one of the things that I wanted to look at is, and I like to hear myself talk, so I'm going to continue to do it, but I went to a Office of Broadband Deployment conference a few months ago now, where they talked about all the different permits that are necessary. It was about pole attachments, but you know, all the permits that are necessary to either put a new pole in, or you know, if you're making changes to the pole design. Is it, you know, is it a railroad crossing? Is it going to you know, somehow implicate the Corps of Engineers or historic preservation and the like of that? Does any of this information capture that? You know, that the holdup on an attachment being made is not under the control of the utility and not under the control of the attacher, and not under the control of the commission. See, that's really what it is. I don't want, you know, I want to be able to shift blame somewhere else. But I mean, are there situations where, golly, you know, we're waiting on Division of Water to get back to us, or transportation, or
There
something like that?
could be, right? I
Okay.
would say 80 to 90% are all relative to poles, right? Whether they're similar pole owner, different pole owner, right? Or another communication entity. And then, I would say in the 10% range, we have, highways, right, with KYTC, railroads, those types of things.
Okay, and then and do those cause, do you think, any unnecessary delays, or?
I think they're part of the total picture, right?
Okay. So if they're part of the total picture when it comes to that, is that part of the make-ready work? If the utilities go out and do a survey, this is a question to the entire group. Utilities go out to do a survey. And they said, this is the make-ready work. Usually, at least in my mind, we've been talking about comm space or even power space, changes. Does the survey with the make-ready work also say, well, we're gonna have to increase the height, we're gonna have to, this is gonna involve a crossing or something like that, it involves, it might implicate another agency, is that part of the survey, do we know?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's wrapped up in the make-ready work,
It's, for us, it's wrapped up in
Oh, the
what we
survey.
refer to as the field survey and engineering. So as part of the engineering, we acquire the necessary permits.
Okay.
And I did check with our engineering group, and right now, we do not have any that are waiting on any sort of permits that are delayed more than any normal part of the process.
nobody's helping me shift blame to other people than the Public Service Commission, but okay. All right, I just wanted to I kind of wanted to back that out at least and not have to know those things. So, I could read this, but just tell me, what is the primary holdup? One on the utility side and two on the attacher side. So in terms of percentage-wise, looking at these numbers, does it differ between KU and the cooperatives, or is it always kind of the same thing? Or do you know?
I would say it's holistically pretty much the same thing. It's just moving all of the permits through the funnel.
Okay.
In terms of, and make-ready and the actual field construction is typically, no pun intended, the longest pole.
I appreciate that, though. And so, it's that, and then is it the same thing, like, once permits are cleared and they're sent to charter, what's the primary cause for delay?
Is getting all of the respective permits back needed to finalize field construction.
Okay, because it doesn't make sense to roll out your contractor if you're only gonna be able to complete a portion of your.
Correct.
Okay. So at that point, it's not as if, because I want to be able to paint a picture to the legislature, like a real picture to the legislature when we send a report. It's like, yes, these attachments are not being made, but there's a good reason for it. Not in, and you'll all have an opportunity to review the data that we're going to compile. I'm going to talk about that later on when we submit it into the quarterly report. I'm going to get it from these status updates that you're giving me so that we can, and then let you all take a look at it and make sure that, what we have compiled and summarized is accurate, so we can give them an accurate thought. Because what happens is the legislature will hear there's a delay in making these attachments. The commission was given an order through the Senate Joint Resolution to make necessary changes to, clear up the backlog and to promote the deployment of broadband in unserved and underserved areas. If some of these delays are really not the fault of anybody, it's just a matter of timing. If things are getting through the funnel, they're getting through the funnel timely, but there's just the size of the funnel. Right? And you're waiting on those things. That's what I'm trying to get a sense of, so that we can give just an accurate report. And so that's why I'm asking these questions about those things. And then if anything does arise, if you have problems with any other permitting agencies or anything like that, I would like to know while we get these updates going on.
Okay.
And I think, Joe, from the cooperative standpoint, that third-party influence bucket for the miscellaneous items, and I'm just kind of looking at the report most recently filed, which I think the data, shows that there hasn't been kind of a downward trajectory. Things are still progressing well through the cooperative systems, but like, for example, Clark Energy has a 222, you see that line, make ready overdue, bucket. And talking with Tyler and Clark Energy, you know, I think most of those are, maybe all of them relate to poles that are in a field that has crops that are currently, you know, growing.
So that's the inter-county bucket there.
Okay, inter-county bucket, I'm sorry.
The Clark
I mixed
one
those
is, there's just a lot of make ready where, to the point where there may be restringing new conductor in place on those sections. And so we're working with the charter team on figuring out if they want to pay for that or if we want to look at some alternative on that, that OLT there. I think
So
that's-
I guess I meant inter-county, but that type of example is, and we're in communication with the attacher about that issue, you know, that we can go ahead and make these, you know, proceed and deal with the crops that will be destroyed, or we can wait till they're harvested. And I think that type of communication and cooperation is what is gonna make this all work, but that's also one of those situations where the numbers are telling you some things might be past due or is being held up, but it's not really something that is you know, it can't be avoided, you know, it's just something that is in that miscellaneous kind of outside influence that is not somebody's fault or anybody's blaming anybody, it's just kind of one of those things.
Should have a little category, blameless.
Yeah, I mean, blame the
You know,
plants.
something along those lines. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. It's just because we started this process back in January, just lessons learned, really more of the practical applications of it. And that's the, you know, these are the explanations to help us as the regulator, you know, inform our commissioners about, you know, what changes, if necessary, need to be made or anything like that. And once again, we're still in the infancy of the regulation. We're still in the infancy of the emergency amendments to the regulation. You know, I remember taking a banking law class where they say most laws in banking law are just 2 crises behind. And so you wonder if some of these changes that we're making, it's hard to think prospectively until we start seeing the bead money hit. I think Alan talked about the timing of the tranches that were coming in, and we would start seeing that. But with the restrictions of KRS Chapter 13A, which govern the promulgation of regulations, we have to start doing things prior to really getting any ideas of this. So I'm trying to get an idea of how to match these things as close to possible when we get to it. So, but a blameless category wouldn't be bad, going back to that. It's like it's nobody's fault, you know, just a bucket of reasons. Do you all run into the same thing like that? I mean,
We do have a handful of applications right now that are being held up by the crop issue. I think our biggest issue that we've identified are what we refer to as a foreign-owned pole, so some third party. Looking at our numbers right now, we've completed all of our work on applications that contain 1,664 poles. Those are being held up by 119 foreign poles. So there's 119 third-party poles that we're waiting to get completed so that we can do our attachments or our transfers so that we can then release them to charter. We've got another 1,961, almost 2,000 that are bound up for the same reason and stuff that we're actively working. So we haven't completed all of our work on those yet, but we're actively working those. So between the ones that we've completed and we're actively working, there's 3,400-ish poles there
okay.
that are being held up.
And I know we've talked about it before, that those third-party polls would be one in which you probably have a joint use agreement. So it's going to be would it be anybody else but a telecom?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, shouldn't be.
No.
I'm about to say, because otherwise, you know, there are certified territories for electricity.
Yeah, we don't. So what's complicated about these for us is we don't manage this part of the process, right?
Yeah.
We're not the ones making application to attach to the third party. And so that is like, it's following the same process that we're following for all of our polls in parallel. but the construction may not be getting done at the same time between the two organizations.
And it's sometimes the same problem that Charter is talking about, where you don't have all the permits. It's like you don't want to roll your
That's right.
crew out until you know that you can just get it there and make ready work on your poles, and then all of a sudden, you want to be able to make it all at the same time too.
That's more efficient for us, but we will work our part of the application.
Right, but I can understand why, I mean, you can position yourself in that way to do that, but, yeah. You know, at some point too, thinking about this, I think the cooperatives offered to give a demonstration about pole attachments. We'll wait till the weather moderates, to this, because it'll be a very quick meeting if it's cold, and I don't want to put anybody on a pole if it's going to be inclement weather or cold or anything like that, but that's still in the commissioner's bucket, of things to do. All right, so let me ask just holistically, since I have the people in here that probably can answer this better. Are things working better than they were in January when we first had these meetings? I'm getting nods, but you know, is it attributable to the good graces of the Public Service Commission, patting us on the back, or is it also just lessons learned? Like, you all had to engage anyway. I didn't mean it was not attributed to the commission. I'm trying to put words in your mouth. But, you know, have these meetings helped?
I would holistically say that they have. I think in addition to some of the data preparation, has identified where we can mesh our two systems collectively together to identify kind of gaps and opportunities, lessons learned throughout the process, and where can we kind of pivot and make operational changes there. So
Okay.
they've definitely been beneficial.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, so it is, I mean, as a whole, we hopefully helped not hindered with this. I mean, some of the conversations you were probably going to have anyway, regardless of whether or not the government interfered in your workings. But with that in mind, and tell everybody at Harvard hello. So, you know, with that in mind, have the emergency amendments to the regulation even been implicated in anything yet? I know that the tariffs were technically not supposed to be filed until, I think, yesterday, with an effective date of November 30th, but we've made changes. You know, we had meetings, we made changes, like, here, we're gonna address this, we're gonna address this, we're gonna address this. Have any of the changes been implicated in practice? I know that KU they're operating under the high volume agreement charter, and so the other attachers who might be taking advantage of the new regulations aren't here to speak on it, but
No, we're not seeing anybody leverage those regs at this point. We do have two additional, what I'll sort of generically refer to as high-volume attachers, that are looking to attach in the near future, that are, we're working to set up high-volume agreements with them, though not work under the reg.
okay. I mean, because, an agreement's always available regardless of whether or not it falls under the poll numbers. You know, what about you all? Have you seen, besides, charter's here, but, you know, everybody, there's gotta be some other people out there.
It's been a little bit slower compared to what it was before the emergency regulations had passed in terms of sheer volume, so I don't think any of the higher limits have been reached. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. We've talked about it at a high level when that picks up, but right now it's been sort of business as usual under the initial regulations, not needing to utilize the new regulations.
We would agree. I think we're too early in the process to see some of the outputs.
Okay.
And then I think additionally too, with round two just getting signed, right? That volume is going to start funneling in, and those are the projections and the things that we're working through with the teams now, where that incremental volume is expected.
Okay. And so we might see we might get some evidence of the effects of the regulations, not now, but, you know, going through this process. Because the way that the process works is that the emergency regulation that's in effect right now rolls off either February 25th or 26th. I plan to file well before that, so we don't have to worry about it becoming null and void. But under the way that the procedure works, we have to file emergency regulation, but also in an ordinary regulation. So the ordinary regulation will go into effect while and it goes through its process, and the ordinary regulation, I think, also goes through its promulgation process, which takes a little bit longer, but which will give us the opportunity we use the royal we plus all y'all, to, if changes need to be made to that while other information comes in, changes made after comment, public comment, those can be made, and that might be a little bit further down the process where we can see maybe more money hitting the applicants, the attachers, and those applications coming into the utilities. And you might have new high-volume agreements that might help inform the KU. Kentucky Power could, be in there. I know Eric Langley's on here, so he probably has an insight into Kentucky Power as well, but, they can start getting high volumes of attachments. I mean, it'll be information that'll be beneficial. So just, I know we're under a kind of a time crunch. Well, I know I'm under a kind of a time crunch. And so, we'll hopefully make some changes to it, but then once we start to gather some more evidence, we can inform, maybe a further amendments down the road before the original regulation, which we follow, become final on that. So that's why I want to keep on asking these questions. And I apologize if I keep on asking the same questions, but it's, I'm trying just to get to the bottom of this, see what practically can be done by the government, what practically can be done by leaving it up to you all to agree to things, and then just kind of come to that.
This is Eric Langley. Can I weigh in? You raised the Kentucky Power issue, and I know that Jeffrey Nickham's there for Kentucky Power. I don't know if any of the operations folks are.
Yeah, he was sitting on the attacher side, so of the conference.
But I think that Kentucky Power is not seeing anything even close to implicating the emergency reg when it comes to applications. And even though I'm not here on behalf of Duke Energy, I do think that Jeremy Gibson and Marissa Baseman are on the line if they wanted to weigh in on behalf of Duke.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, this is Jeremy Gibson with Duke Energy. I mean, our workflow right now in Kentucky is next to nothing. So, I just pulled a report on the year, and we have 438 polls that have been submitted on the year. That includes overlash and new attachments. And of the 438, approximately 150 were from municipalities for banners. So that shows you the numbers we're seeing.
Well, and does Duke have any lines in areas that considered unserved or underserved, and then thus subject to the BEAD money or the RDOF money?
I would think few.
No.
But I would say there are some, but very little.
Okay. And so my guess is you would not be as affected by, conjecture on my part, but I think well informed, that you might not be as affected by the roll-in of the federal money as some of the other participants in this matter.
I'd say that's true.
All right, that's what I was thinking. Same thing with LG&E, I would imagine. Does LG&E have, there might be some areas where you all serve where there might be, unserved, underserved areas.
Perhaps, yeah.
But I can't imagine there's a lot.
We're not seeing a lot
Just
of
the
that.
Jefferson County.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So, all right. Any other comments on these updates? I don't intend to keep you all here too terribly long. I do appreciate you all coming in here and all. But any other discussion on this?
The only thing that I just wanted to mention, just for the record, it's nothing we can do anything about here, but given the weather that we've had since in the last month or so with the hurricanes, you might notice that our numbers on the construction haven't been progressing quite the way they had been. So our commitment is 200 poles per month in our high volume plan. We've been exceeding that every month until this most recent month where we only did 79. We had over 200 resources working down in the hurricane ravaged areas, a lot of resources off system, in addition to our own restoration, which was, a week plus worth of work.
I think we've seen the reg asset application for that, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what about weather? Is that just kind of a force majeure, hold harmless, once again, kind of the blameless bucket of it all? Obviously I know that especially in the wintertime, as if, an ice storm comes through, everybody's just trying to get their service restored rather than worry about the processing of the application.
The same piece works back up, and then we just work to see what delta we have afterwards and create a plan.
Okay, all right. You know, because once again, none of this is in a vacuum.
Correct.
That's what I like. All right, anything for the cooperatives, anything else on the
No, I don't think
updates?
so.
All right, I like the form of these updates, and I would appreciate the same form of these. Once again, this commission staff will issue a notice about kind of what staff would like to get. Once again, this is all just for staff to look at and to then just make recommendations to advise the commissioners into what changes, if anything, need to be made, and whether it's in a regulation or practice or, you know, tariffs like that. I'm gonna skip to, I put 3 items on the agenda. I'm gonna skip to the third one. It was just a matter of timely payment. I do see that, say, for example, looking at the KU Charter High Volume Plan, that if I look at, you know, the highest percentage of polls laid is 65.95%, and that's just the make-ready payments not made, right? So, you know, KU didn't raise this, but in comments to the regulation, when we filed it, the cooperative said that can sometimes be a problem for the cooperatives where they have made the make-ready work and they're still waiting on payment. They've paid their contractors, or they've paid their contractors to be ready to make that. They're holding this money and they're waiting on payment from the attachers. And so, and they don't have the resources, they don't have shareholder money that they can draw against. You know, they just have their members on that. So has that been an issue in slowing the rollout, the payment? And has it also been a hardship on the cooperatives?
Yes, yeah, there still is some significant outstanding invoices, and on the make-ready side of things, something that's been brought up to me by a few cooperatives specifically is when there's a delay in sending out that make-ready estimate to getting that paid, it could be sometimes months where Charter has to check their plans to see if they can afford to pay that based off of, you know, their return on investment, that sort of stuff. But then a bunch of it gets paid at once, you know, a couple hundred polls, and then those timelines start for the make ready for all those permits. And so the cooperative is scrambling to get that make ready done in time. Whereas if it had been sort of staggered out throughout the time that all those make ready estimates were being delivered, they could have a more measured approach to doing that make ready.
Okay, so it's more of a resources, not a financial strain? Is that, because the way that I read the comment was, it's similar to financial strain, is that the cooperatives are floating some of this cost, and they don't really have, their margins can be pretty thin.
Yes.
And I think that that's part of it as well, and I think that there's really kind of maybe 3 scenarios that we can kind of maybe talk through about when timely payment is important. And what Tyler's describing is, we've provided a make-ready estimate. We haven't really expended funds towards completing make-ready, but we're waiting for them to pay the make-ready estimate so that we can move forward. That's not so much a financial hardship because we're not out a bunch of money, but it's an administrative hardship because eventually, and we've seen this, you know, that log jam gets freed up, and all of a sudden we have a bunch of polls that require make-ready under a certain time frame that would otherwise have kind of flowed, you know, more gradually. And so timely payment on after you receive a make-ready estimate, it can, you know, cause some issues. Then there's the second situation that I think you're speaking more specifically about, which is payment after make-ready is complete, and we've already expended the money. We're you know, the money's gone. We've paid for the labor and the equipment, and now we want to be paid for that delta between the estimate and what it was actually incurred, for instance. And in that instance, that's more of a financial hardship than it is probably an administrative hardship, because we've got money that's just been spent and we're waiting to be reimbursed, basically. And then I think there's a third bucket, which is violations, safety violations or unpermitted attachments that under the, you know, are being charged for violations and fees that are not paid. And, you know, I think that's kind of a mixed bag in terms of financial hardship / safety issues / kind of, you know, I think all of these kind of suggest that timely payment is important for a number of reasons, financially, administratively, kind of just the whole process is based on payment on time.
I see nodding over here. Is that, you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. Excuse me, I think that's a very cogent analysis of the issues involved with timely payments.
Okay, all right.
So I would add just a couple of things here real quickly. One is, I would say that the timely payment issue for us was, as far as make-ready construction is concerned, was a larger issue in the beginning, trying to ramp up. And we sort of have enough work in the hopper now that it's not such a big deal, because it's not so much a financial burden as it is ultimately a hindrance to the timeline of implementation of broadband, right? So for us, it's not a financial issue at this point. We have the crews here, they're working. We have enough work to keep them busy as payments coming in, so it's not really a financial burden. The one issue that we have been having conversations about with Charter, and this will probably lead in, I think, to some of what Heather's gonna say here, but we're looking to make a couple of potential amendments to the high volume plan. And one of those is a monthly engineering payment, monthly billing on the engineering side rather than a true up at the end, simply because of the volume here and the burn rate. We've kind of racked up millions of dollars in engineering costs that aren't getting trued up until the end of the process.
Like, how long sometimes does that take? I mean, is this?
Well,
is it true up?
we've got engineering costs that we've been accruing since March, and we haven't even started any of the true-up process.
That's what I was wondering, like, you have this high volume plan, it's like,
Right.
We'll true it up when this is over, and when this is over, it could be 5 years from now or something, and so, I mean, I can understand, okay, all right.
So, but we're working together on that.
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
anything that necessarily requires a reg change or anything, but.
Well, not on the high volume
Right.
agreement, but in a scenario where you have, it could be something permissive in the regulations that
Yeah.
the utility could have the option of having, a mid-project true up or something along
Mm-hmm.
those lines. I don't know. But anyway, you all go ahead. I'm sorry. You got talked
sure.
around.
From a make-ready perspective, and agree with both what Tyler and Jason said, is that for a make-ready, when we receive that estimate, right, we have to go back and say, do we have the funding within the project? Some of it goes back to our ready-to-attach conversation. Do we have all of the make-ready estimates back within the project to make a comprehensive decision on funding, things like that? Do we go underground in a certain area? Do we take an alternate path? Then we have to take that, gain funding if necessary, then write the check, then deliver it, and all of those pieces. And so I can see where some of that path, if you will, could create then a bottleneck in a delivery, right? And so we're trying to individually work through that, right, should that be an issue or a concern.
So, you talked about funding, and this brings me to, how does, and I don't know who can talk to this, but how does Charter get the money from either the RDOF or BEAD? Is it, you get the money, you do the attachments, or you do the attachments, you get the funding? How does this work? I've been blissfully ignorant of it all, but I'm now asking this question. So, I mean, would that cause a delay in making a payment for make-ready work?
Not necessarily
Okay.
receiving, but what's allotted for the project,
Allotted from the feds?
as well as us,
I
right?
see,
Because
okay.
it's a combination. So
Okay.
every project basically has, in simple terms, a budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that budget, if the make-ready estimates, right, for that project are exceeded, right, and there's give and take between projects, right? And then we have to go back and make that decision to seek more funding, seek an alternate path, right, look at other options.
Okay, all right.
And I think what Heather's alluding to is sometimes we get a grant that's an entire county, which may have multiple pole owners. So we initially were allowing for X number of dollars per pole and estimating a 10% replacement. We've seen significantly higher than that, in some cases 3 times higher. So that makes us have to go back and review the budget.
Right, any concern, footnote question to that about, I remember how much ink was spilt about red tag poles and the cost of pole replacement. Regardless of the cost, has there been any concerns that some of the poles that had to be replaced were to be red tagged, but the cost have been sent to you all? Or is that just, you haven't identified any of those situations or thought about that yet?
I don't think we've seen red tag poles being charged, not to my knowledge anyway.
All right. I just remember we spent a lot of time talking about that.
Well, they absolutely should not be, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
part of our engineering review, and it's our practice to not
Right.
pass those costs along.
Well, and that's
So
why-
Hopefully that isn't happening. It's not to my knowledge. Yeah.
And it shouldn't be happening. That's why I was asking the question, because it really, maybe it has happened in other jurisdictions with other experiences, but, we have, but we put in the regulation, the rebuttable presumption that if it was not, if that pole had not been inspected within your normal amount of time, and it needed to be replaced to accommodate a new attacher, it would be presumed to have been red tagged. Or, no, it would not, yeah. I can't remember what it was. Basically, the utility would have to pay for it.
Right.
Yeah, it would be presumed to have been red tagged unless you could prove otherwise on that. I just wanted to make sure, I don't know if that's prevented any situations. I know we're all honest actors here. But or at least prevented any disputes. So that's why I was asking the question, anyway. Back to the pole replacements, do you find that it's more a higher number of cooperative poles that needs to be replaced or investor-owned, or does it not matter
I think it's fairly consistent.
across?
And it really depends on the terrain, the location. Obviously, the further out you get from a municipal area, the smaller the poles tend to be, and we tend to have to replace a higher percentage.
No.
Shorter.
Yeah, no, I live, which way is east? About 55 miles east. And things start to get a little hillier the further you go. And you start going further into the southeast, and you'll see the utility poles go up and down. You're like, oh, that's a 30-foot pole, but all of a sudden it looks like it only has about 10-foot clearance as it goes up a hill. And every once in a while you just see some that are just kind of casually leaning against something else. But I'm sure that they'll fix that. I don't need to make the call on it. But I assume that a lot of it is terrain related. It's pretty flat.
It's more geography than owner.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that what we've seen is a much higher percentage for this rural build, a much higher percentage of make-ready than we had traditionally seen, and what we based the historical data that we based our estimates on, which is consistent with what Ms. Day's saying, and our percentage, I believe, is more consistent with what the co-ops have traditionally seen.
Okay.
And so when you kind of think about that, we're doing a rural build, and our rural areas now are being more consistent with percentages the co-ops have seen. So I think the numbers are pretty consistent. And I think it's been in that 12 to 15, 16% kind of range.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah.
and that's higher than I just kind of thought it would be. Is that higher than you all
It
anticipated?
is, and I think as Mr. Jones alluded to, it's one of the key things we're kind of taking a look at 6 months into our high volume agreement, right? And what that make-ready rate is, and then how do we get through the volume that we have within the timetable, and so that's something we're working through.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not just a cost issue, it's a time issue too.
Correct.
Yeah, I'll say this, if you all can go ahead and make the request, you all the attachers, that the commission allow self-help for pole replacements, but I don't think that it's going to gain any traction with the commissioners. You can try, but it just doesn't seem, I don't see it happening, even though, I mean, maybe it would speed it up, but at what cost, I don't know.
Right.
We'll see. Sorry to make the pole owner sweat there for a second. Well, I'm trying to be candid here, because really, what we're trying to do is promote broadband deployment here. And there's no sense in trying to be, on one side or the other, try to be at loggerheads. It's just try to work to some practical solutions if we can, to the extent the government can come up with those things. Are we on? Darn it. Okay, I didn't mean to make that comment while it was being recorded. Okay, so, I mean, think about, this comes to my the third item on the agenda is just changes to the amended emergency regulation. There's emergency amendments to the regulation that was amended after comments. It expires February 25th or 26th. Regardless, it'll be filed, whatever replaces it will be filed before then. So think about if there's any changes that need to be made in the regulation about payment, how payment can be made, if it can speed things up. I know part of it's just going to be simply about business models, and I mean, as the attacher, I mean, you have the luxury of taking some time to look at whether or not this meets your thing. But that's one of the issues that I think we can identify. Mike, do you want to speak, or you?
Mike Schwanner from Charter. So, first of all, thank you as always for hosting today. I think we've given some initial thought to providing, comments and red lines on the regulations.
Okay.
I don't know if you have a theory on process or timing.
do.
So just to be candid with you, we think it's beneficial to you and us to kind of begin to put things on paper sooner rather than later, right? Because I think a lot of times, otherwise we're talking theory,
Yeah.
right? Or we're talking past each other. So just to kind of put a trial balloon out there, for you to react to, we would potentially be ready. I don't know that we would have it far in advance, but we'd be prepared to potentially file something with you for the next meeting on the 22nd. So I'll let you.
Okay, so I actually have given some thought to this. I don't think we need it by the 22nd, because I've talked to the commissioners about this, and I think that they'd be on board with it. But my proposal would be, we don't need to meet on the 22nd. We still keep the December 13th meeting there. So we still get maybe a series of 2 updates on the status of the poll attachments applications before the December 13th meeting. I'm going to send to council for the various entities here the Word document of the regulation. It's the emergency amendment. It's the emergency regulation as amended after comment. Okay, it's a Word document, so it's going to have the track changes with the emergency amendments in it. I'm going to send it to council for all the parties. All right, I want everybody to work up their own version of that document. I don't need them to you all send it back and forth, right? But redline the changes in the document. I don't want comments off to the side. All right, what I would like to have, and I'll put this in a staff notice so we get it down. What I would like to have is the way that the regulation is going to be read, it's page number and it's going to have line numbers. Just like when we file the regulation, you all have seen it. I've seen it a lot, but you send it there. And then so you will say in a separate document, page 5, lines da-da-da-da-da, we propose, the proposed change is for this reason. So that way that when the commission and I are reviewing the proposed changes, we can look at the regulation with the language change, and you don't have it diminished because you have the comment here with the word thing. And then there'll be this separate document that's over here. And I mean, my eyes are failing, it was part of the reason, but also I think it's beneficial so we can do a page turn, and then everybody's working also under the same format. File those, let's say, if you want to file it by the 23rd or 22nd was our next meeting, that's fine, but probably be, the end of November, beginning of December, maybe responses to those a few days before that December 13th meeting. And then we come down here, December 13th meeting, we can talk through those issues, all right? Also not related to the amendments, but related to the report to the legislature. I don't know if we'll have an opportunity to have a meeting after we get the data. So we have quarterly reports due to the legislature, updating them on the status of the commission helping get rid of the backlog and the like of that. What I would like, and we'll put this down in the staff notice. Are you taking this down so I can remember what I said? Because
Yes.
I never do. Is that not only are we looking at numbers, because I think what we will try to do is take a look at numbers, maybe like here's progress here, identify some of the issues, but also maybe have some narratives. I would like your all's input on that as well. And so we would get a draft to you all. I don't know if it'd be before the 13th, but we could always have just, we could post it into the case file and get responses back so that we can send it over to the legislature by December 31st. That way, you all know what we're going to say. We know that what we're saying is accurate, because even though it's your all's numbers, we look at it, maybe we misinterpret it. I just want to make sure that we don't do that. Does that sound like a plan? I know that everybody wants to be here on the 22nd of November, but sorry. Does that suit, Mike? I'd give it some thought.
I think that makes absolute sense. I mean, we were working within your existing calendar, so it was not like we were compelled
Right.
You know, to work with that deadline. I think that certainly works for us. I think for, you know, protecting myself from Heather, you know, physically hitting me, it would be helpful if we probably just did one data update.
Okay.
Between now and the 13th, right? Because in any given moment, 30 days is probably as good as you're gonna get in terms of a change. So if you're comfortable with that, then you know, we gave you something that was literally filed in the last 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
So nominally November 1st. And maybe, you know, we all kind of do an update on or around December 1st, if that's okay with you.
How about just maybe that Monday before the meeting, the 13th, 12th, 11th, 10th,
What's the 9th?
9th?
Yeah, because I want to be sensitive, I mean, with the co-ops and KU, it takes us a little bit of time to kind of work those through with each other. It doesn't happen in a day or two, right?
Right.
So, and I think that'll get you what you need, which is another meaningful input, you know, in
Right.
terms of data and in roughly speaking 30 days.
Well, and what has happened too is that when I you know, recommended the commission, we set these meetings up every 3 weeks. It was kind of what we did beforehand. It kind of occurred to me that I don't know if we needed to do that after the first meeting and this meeting. I'm like, well, you know, I don't know. The purposes of these meetings are slightly different than before we made amendments to the regulations. So I think we could stretch it out a little bit. And so what I would envision the docket doing is that once we get proposed amendments, all right, Sarah, I'll scoot over this way so you don't have to. Once we get amendments or proposed amendments from you all in the comments, the commission will work on making a draft regulation with the amendments, right? That it would file with the LRC and get it to you all sometime, maybe within the first 2 weeks of January. And send it out, have scheduled one more meeting, people can make comments, you can make comments here. And then we have to start the process of, because it's emergency regulation, we also have to send it to the governor's shop to get read over. And also just through the LRC regs compiler so that they can read those things. And so I'm trying to think backwards to that. But I want to make sure that you all will get a chance to see and have a final say on what the commission would propose to file as well. Would that timing work? And I can't remember when the legislature kicks off.
January 7th.
Yes, okay. I knew you would know. Like, and so we'll figure out like do Fridays continue to work? And then after January, maybe it's something we don't, and once the reg is filed, we don't necessarily have to have these meetings, but we can still set up a reporting requirement, amend a procedural schedule so that if there are particular issues, a carrier can, or attacher can bring them to our attention. And of course, there's still the separate complaint process to that.
The only thing I would add is, because I think we're all collectively, you know, open to your input, is, you know, as you saw, there was some evolution, you know, in the data submission from what you saw 30 days ago. So if there's anything about how we're presenting the information, right, you know, you don't need to react to that right now, but in the interim, if there's things where you're like, okay, I really don't like what you're saying, you're not saying enough, you're saying too much, right? Part of what we worked on, you know, with our team was trying to kind of, you'll see like there was some pop-outs, right, with additional explanation.
And I
then
like
a
that.
little-
The more information, the better. And really, one of the things that I think would be beneficial would be, and this is something that the attachers have control over, I think it's been provided before, it's like, here's what we anticipate the number of applications being. Like, can you get a projection of, you know, of the next quarter, the next 6 months, we anticipate a ramp up. Because, you know, that way when we present the information to the legislature, it's like, here's where we were, here's where we are, and here's where we may go. And all that stuff's subject to
And
true
I
up.
think, Ellen, you know, there's two things, Jeb, that are clearly over the horizon. One is the round one state grants, right, which need to be done in 2025.
Yeah, they all have contractual due dates in 2025.
And then the round two, which is the end of 26, right? So setting aside, not that BEAD isn't important and some of these other
Right.
things aren't important, but there are clearly things that are knowable over the next 24 months, right? And we can certainly, you know,
I
add
think-
some high-level information.
I think that would be beneficial. I mean, think about if you're the legislature, you're coming in, they're reading these reports. I think it helps to add context. Not just, like I said, it's not just where we were, we're making progress on the backlog, however you want to categorize the backlog. But we're also, and this is kind of where we are, and then this is where we might be going. And here are the relevant deadlines. So the state grants have to be completed by 2025. All these other things, like this is the anticipated volume increase. And, Charter, you're the attacher in the room right now, but there might be other ones out there too, and we don't have that information. But if there's a high volume agreement, other high volume agreements entered into, we want those to be filed with the commission, so we'll know about that.
That's right.
And then maybe we can reach out to those attachers once they're in there and start to aggregate that information as well, so that it's as holistic of a look as we can. And I do not have a lot of experience dealing with the LRC or the legislature in terms of what they want and the information, but I'm just trying to think that if I were coming in here, I have 10 minutes to look at an issue and then move on to the next thing, especially during the session, what kind of information would be beneficial to us? The last report we sent over was pretty voluminous. I do not intend to rewrite it or to send something like that over. I anticipate something short and sweet.
As we've raised issues here, tried to talk about items that are outside of our control that are concerning, the one thing that I'm hearing that's concerning to me as a poll owner are the delays in these awards or grants being made, and the delays that's then putting on the attachers without the end dates moving at all. My ears kind of perk up when I hear Ellen reference, all of these grants have to be completed in 2025. I don't know the full volume there, but I think some of these awards we were anticipating earlier this year that are just now being made without any of these deadlines moving, which is probably going to be a burden at some point.
At some point.
Yes.
That's why we have a docket. All right, so, and I have one other question I meant to ask, and this really kind of goes back to engineering. So Commissioner Regan was on a panel not too long ago on pole attachments, and I was reading a recap of it, and I think somebody from Connecticut said that they had allowed, I think what's the term, boxing on poles, which is allowing for attachments on both sides of the poles. I had not heard of that. Is that allowed in Kentucky? Do our utilities allow? And I've not seen attachments on both sides of the poles when I was driving along. Anyway.
This Jeremy Gibson with Duke Energy. I'll kind of speak to that from our territory. I know it exists in our territory. I will say that we don't allow it.
Okay.
It does make it more difficult when we have to change out a pole. If you're having to drop the pole down in through communication lines when they are both sides of the pole, it definitely makes it more challenging. You need more crews involved. So we have not allowed it. I know it exists, but it's never been allowed from our perspective.
Okay.
And that's also, it would be a violation of our construction standards as well.
Okay.
I'm
Correct.
cold on the reasons why specifically. I can definitely take that back and speak with our standards group.
It is more curiosity on my part, and I don't know if it would even assist in the deployment of.
I think it would really be a question on how they would process it and if it would speed anything up and make it different.
I just know Mike lives in Connecticut, so I brought it up. Like,
Well, I was actually, the only thing I would note, and I think we should talk about this offline,
Yeah.
is that, the circumstances in Connecticut are fundamentally different than anything we're dealing with in Kentucky, right? I mean, there is no unserved issue in Connecticut, right? And so however they're managing this, which is not necessarily, we're a service provider in Connecticut as well.
Right.
It's much smaller, right? And I've never had this issue come up with our field operations team there. So we can certainly look into it, but I really think whatever should be happening should be relevant to Kentucky, not necessarily.
okay, it was just something that was brought up in a little blurb on it, and you can pretend like I didn't say anything if you don't want to pursue it. I don't require any feedback on it, but it was just, we're kind of brainstorming here, trying to get to some answers.
Well, Joe, I'm not an engineer, of course, but one of the other reasons that I have heard that boxing is generally prohibited is that it impairs, maybe even prohibits, pole climbing. So if a pole has to be climbed, if it's in a location where climbing is part of maintenance, then boxing is a serious impediment.
Hey, Mr. Penny, this is Sean Knowles with the cooperatives. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Just one last comment before we let you go on this. I would, just to underline Mike's point, it's typically an issue where there's congestion on the pole, and obviously in a rural build in Kentucky, that's unlikely to be the case. So I think it's probably not going to apply here.
Okay, we'll back up about 3 minutes where I said forget I said anything about it. We don't need to pursue this anymore. All right. So I think I've made the commission's intent clear, and what the staff notice will be, we'll cancel the November 22nd informal conference. We will send out some deadlines for filings. Also, what maybe some other information should be included in the updates, and then we'll just take it from there. If we do these things, and I appreciate y'all coming in, Mike. I know that probably a long distance to come for an hour and a 7-minute meeting, but I appreciate you being here too. And anybody that traveled far distances,
Joe,
Todd,
just
yes.
a quick question, not traveling in far distance, but one selfish question.
I drive by your house every day on the way to work, so I know, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you not stopping by. In terms of the next deliverable, you suggested red lines and narrative discussion of those changes. You mentioned a December 1st deadline, or approximate, didn't nail it down, but that's the Sunday of Thanksgiving. Just trying to envision if you would picture that being right before Thanksgiving or shortly thereafter.
I'll look at the calendar, honestly, to see. I keep on forgetting it's a late Thanksgiving. I don't want to impair anybody's holidays if I can, but also want time so that we have the edits, proposed edits in, and give participants an opportunity to respond to those. And I don't think the responses need to be filed more than maybe 2 days before the next meeting. It's really for the commission's erudition rather than each other's, because you probably know what you all say to each other. Okay, you would say everything should be a contract. Attachers should say everything should be 5,000 poles. Is the minimum or something like that. So I mean, I'm painting with a broad brush, but I just want to make sure that we can get something across the finish line in accordance with the direction of the Senate Joint Resolution. So, Todd, I'll look at the calendar to make sure that I don't ruin anybody's day, including mine.
Sounds good, thank you.
All right, thank you, Todd. All right, is there anything else that people want to raise? You can always raise it through council. This afternoon, I'll email the Word draft that I think I'd like people to work on, off which I would like people to work. And with staff notice, we'll send out the instructions how I think that we should receive edits on this one. So, is that it? All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you all coming in.